The wrestling world just witnessed an absolute power play that nobody saw coming, and the shockwaves are still reverberating through every corner of the WWE universe. Nick Aldis just threw a massive wrench into Paul Heyman's carefully crafted Wargames strategy, and what happened next has everyone talking about the implications for SmackDown's future. Before we dive into all the chaos that unfolded, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss a single update on this explosive situation. Paul Heyman walked into SmackDown with his usual swagger and confidence, thinking he had everything figured out for Wargames. The wise man had been working behind the scenes for weeks, orchestrating what he believed would be the perfect team composition to dominate at the premium live event. His vision was clear and his plan seemed foolproof, but he clearly didn't account for the kind of authority and decisiveness that Nick Aldis brings to the table as SmackDown's general manager. The tension started building the moment Heyman requested a meeting with Aldis to discuss his Wargames lineup. Heyman came prepared with his characteristic silver tongue, ready to convince Aldis that his way was the only way forward. He laid out his entire strategy, detailing which superstars should be on the team and how they would work together to ensure victory. Heyman spoke with the kind of conviction that has made him one of the most influential figures in professional wrestling history, believing that his decades of experience would carry the day. Nick Aldis sat there listening to every word that came out of Heyman's mouth without interrupting. His expression remained neutral and professional as Heyman continued to present his case with increasing passion. The wise man clearly thought he was making progress and that Aldis would simply rubber stamp his proposal like so many authority figures had done in the past. But Aldis isn't like those other general managers who can be manipulated or convinced to go along with whatever the established powers want. When Heyman finally finished his pitch, there was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Aldis leaned forward in his chair and delivered a response that completely blindsided Heyman. The general manager made it crystal clear that while he respects Heyman's knowledge and experience, the final decisions about Wargames would be made by management and not by special counsels or advocates. Aldis wasn't rude or disrespectful, but his message was unmistakable and his authority was absolute. Heyman's face went through a series of expressions that ranged from confusion to disbelief to barely contained frustration. The man who always has a comeback for everything found himself momentarily speechless. This wasn't how these conversations usually went for Paul Heyman. Throughout his career, he has been able to influence booking decisions and sway authority figures to his way of thinking, but Nick Aldis proved to be an entirely different breed of general manager. The situation escalated when Aldis began to outline his own vision for the Wargames team. His choices differed significantly from what Heyman had proposed, and each difference seemed like a direct challenge to Heyman's authority and influence. Aldis explained his reasoning with the kind of logical precision that made it difficult to argue against, but Heyman, being Heyman, tried anyway. The back and forth between these two master manipulators became increasingly heated as neither man was willing to back down from their position. What makes this confrontation so significant is the broader implication it has for power dynamics on SmackDown. For months now, Heyman has operated with a certain level of autonomy, making moves and pulling strings with minimal interference. His connection to Roman Reigns during the Tribal Chief's historic reign gave him an unprecedented amount of influence backstage. Even after Roman's loss and the subsequent shifts in the power structure, Heyman has maintained a strong voice in SmackDown affairs. But Aldis just sent a message that those days might be coming to an end. The specific disagreements about the Wargames team composition reveal a lot about the different philosophies these two men have about professional wrestling. Heyman has always favored building around established main event talent and creating narratives that center on star power and proven commodities. His approach has worked countless times throughout his career, from his days with ECW to his management of Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Heyman believes in putting all your resources behind your top guys and letting them carry the load. Aldis, on the other hand, seems to have a more balanced approach that takes into account not just star power but also momentum and current storylines and what makes sense for long-term planning. His background as a champion in multiple promotions and his time running the NWA gives him a perspective that differs from Heyman's WWE-centric worldview. Aldis wants to build depth across the entire roster rather than concentrating everything at the top, and that philosophy is reflected in his Wargames decisions. The specific names that became points of contention between Aldis and Heyman tell their own story. Heyman wanted certain veterans and established names on the team, believing their experience would be crucial in the chaotic Wargames environment. Aldis pushed for including some younger talent and rising stars who have been building momentum in recent weeks. This wasn't just about filling 5 spots on a team, but about 2 different visions for what SmackDown should be and who should be positioned as the future of the brand. One particularly contentious moment came when they discussed the team captain role. Heyman had a very specific person in mind for this position, someone who he has worked with before and who he believes has the leadership qualities necessary to guide a team through Wargames. Aldis rejected this suggestion outright and proposed someone completely different. The reasoning behind each choice highlighted the fundamental differences in how these men evaluate talent and leadership. Heyman values loyalty and proven history, while Aldis seems more interested in current form and potential. The atmosphere in the room became increasingly tense as neither man showed any willingness to compromise. Heyman tried every trick in his considerable arsenal to change Aldis's mind. He appealed to tradition and pointed to historical precedents and even attempted to use his relationship with higher UPS in WWE as leverage. But Aldis remained unmoved and unbothered by any of these tactics. His position was clear and he had the authority to enforce his decisions regardless of how Heyman felt about them. What really drove home the extent of Aldis's dominance in this situation was how he handled Heyman's attempts at manipulation. The wise man is legendary for his ability to twist conversations and find angles that give him what he wants even when it initially seems like he's losing an argument. But Aldis anticipated these moves and shut them down before they could gain any traction. Every time Heyman tried to redirect the conversation or introduce a new angle, Aldis brought things back to the central point that he was the general manager and these were his decisions to make. The ramifications of this power struggle extend far beyond just the Wargames team. This confrontation establishes a new hierarchy on SmackDown that could affect storylines for months to come. If Heyman can't get his way with something as important as Wargames, what does that mean for his other plans and schemes? How will he adapt to working under a general manager who isn't afraid to overrule him? These questions are now at the forefront of everyone's minds as they try to predict what comes next. There's also the matter of how the superstars themselves will react to this situation. Some of them had likely received assurances from Heyman about their roles at Wargames only to find out that those promises meant nothing once Aldis made his decisions. The trust issues this creates could lead to new conflicts and unexpected alliances. Wrestlers who were counting on Heyman's influence to get them opportunities might now be looking to curry favor directly with Aldis, instead cutting out the middleman entirely. The timing of this confrontation is particularly interesting given where we are in the WWE calendar. Wargames is one of the most important events of the year and the stakes couldn't be higher for everyone involved. For Aldis to choose this moment to assert his authority so forcefully sends a message that he's not interested in maintaining the status quo or playing politics. He's willing to make tough decisions and face the consequences even if it means going head-to-head with one of the most influential people in the company. Heyman left that meeting looking visibly shaken, which is something fans rarely see from the wise man. His usual composure and confidence seemed rattled and you could see him processing the reality that his influence on SmackDown might not be what it once was. This doesn't mean Heyman is finished or that he won't find ways to work around Aldis, but it does represent a significant shift in the power balance. The question now is how Heyman responds to this challenge and whether he'll try to undermine Aldis or accept the new reality and work within it. The WWE Universe has been buzzing about this confrontation since word started spreading about what went down. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from support for Aldis standing his ground to concern about what this means for storyline continuity. Some fans appreciate seeing a general manager who actually exercises authority and makes decisions based on what they think is best rather than being a puppet for others. Other fans worry that sidelining Heyman's input might result in less compelling television since he has such a proven track record of creating engaging narratives. What makes this situation even more compelling is that both men have legitimate points. Heyman's experience and track record speak for themselves and his understanding of how to build stars and create moments is second to none. But Aldis brings fresh perspective and a willingness to shake things up which SmackDown arguably needs after years of similar patterns and predictable outcomes. The collision between these two philosophies was inevitable and we're now seeing it play out in real time. The Wargames team that Aldis ultimately decided on is going to be fascinating to watch regardless of the backstage drama. His choices reflect a specific strategy and vision that we'll only fully understand once we see them in action. If his team succeeds, it validates his approach and further solidifies his authority as general manager. If they fail, Heyman will certainly be there to point out that his way would have worked better, setting up an even more intense power struggle going forward. Behind the scenes, there are reportedly mixed reactions to how Aldis handled this situation. Some people in WWE management appreciate his decisiveness and his refusal to be influenced by established power brokers. They see him as exactly the kind of strong general manager that SmackDown needs to create fresh storylines and break out of established patterns. Others worry that alienating someone as connected and influential as Paul Heyman could create problems down the line, especially if Heyman decides to make things difficult. The superstars on the roster are watching this situation very carefully because it affects how they approach their own careers on SmackDown. If Aldis is truly in charge and making decisions without being swayed by people like Heyman, then the entire political landscape of the brand has shifted. Wrestlers who might have previously gone through Heyman to get opportunities now know they need to focus on impressing Aldis directly. This could lead to a more merit-based system where performance matters more than relationships, which would be a significant change from how things have often worked in WWE. There's also speculation about whether this confrontation was entirely organic or if there are larger storyline plans at play. WWE has become very good at blurring the lines between reality and fiction, and this situation has elements that could go either way. Maybe this is genuine backstage conflict that's spilling over into the public eye, or maybe it's a carefully crafted narrative designed to add another layer of intrigue to Wargames. Either way, it's working because everyone is talking about it, and that's ultimately what matters in the wrestling business. Looking ahead, the relationship between Nick Aldis and Paul Heyman is going to be one of the most important dynamics on SmackDown. These aren't two people who are just going to ignore each other and go their separate ways. Their roles require them to interact regularly, and every interaction is now going to have this tension underlying it. Heyman is not the type to forget being overruled and embarrassed, and Aldis has shown he's not going to back down from his positions. The ongoing battle between these two could provide compelling television for months. The wrestlers who ended up on Aldis's Wargames team now carry extra pressure because they need to prove that his faith in them was justified. They're not just representing SmackDown or fighting for brand supremacy, but they're also validating Aldis's decision-making and his vision for what the brand should be. If they fail, it gives ammunition to everyone who thinks Heyman should have been given more input. If they succeed, it establishes Aldis as someone whose instincts should be trusted going forward. Make sure you subscribe to stay updated on how this power struggle continues to develop, because this is far from over. The collision between Nick Aldis's authority and Paul Heyman's influence has created one of the most intriguing backstage dynamics in recent WWE history, and the fallout is going to affect SmackDown for a long time to come. Whether you side with Aldis's fresh approach or Heyman's proven track record, there's no denying that this confrontation has added an extra layer of excitement to an already anticipated War Games event.